Let's talk to a couple of people who've watched politics for a long time and elections, Ben Oquist and Parnell Palmer-McGuinness. Great to see you both. Parnell, let's just pick up on one of the seats Trudy wrapped up with there, that being Bradfield, the Teals. We seem to think, the Teal movement, it was all about last election, but there are still some issues here with Climate 200 and well-resourced independent candidates.
That's right. And of course, there are still some issues with people feeling like the Liberal Party doesn't necessarily represent them anymore in seats like that, which the Liberal Party has to overcome. And of course, Dutton's focus on the outer urban seats still plays into that. Having said that, particularly Bradfield, they've got a great Liberal candidate. Giselle Kaptarian is going to give the Teal a run for her money, because Giselle is basically everything that the Teal voters were voting for when they said that they were moving from the Liberals to the Teals. So she's very much an Allegra spender sort of person, and therefore might attract some of that Teal vote in that area.
A much better chance, and there you go, the margin's only 2.5%, but she is a much better chance, you would imagine, than the previous outgoing member in Paul Fletcher, who looked like he was in a fair bit of trouble there.
He did. And I think, people were looking for something fresh in that electorate, and Giselle really is that. So I do think that she's in for a good chance. She's got good economic credentials as well, which people are looking for as the cost of living bites even in those sorts of seats. What
this reminds us of, though, Ben, is that while you've got the presidential sort of head-to-head race of the two leaders, there's 30 seats, maybe 35, key lower house seats that are really going to decide this thing. And as a Liberal frontbencher said to me yesterday, this is hand-to-hand combat in those 30 seats.
Yeah, I think it's mostly about New South Wales and Victoria. I think, the coalition's after 5 seats in each of those states probably. But as Parnell was saying, if they're going for those outer suburban seats with their messages on nuclear and gas and petrol, that doesn't necessarily play so well in the Teal seats. I think Nicolette is putting up Nicolette Buller, a very big campaign in Bradfield, and it's a big shot to win that. You'd expect Allegra to win and Zali to win. The other Teal seats will be close, but there are new ones like Cowper, even some being talked about on the Gold Coast or Wannon. So there are so many non-traditional contests at this election as well. Even seats like Ryan, which the Liberals are hoping to win back, I think it's probably turned into a 3-way race between Labor, Liberal and the Greens, who are trying to hold that seat, as well as holding Brisbane and Griffith up there. It just points to how many non-traditional contests there are in this race. And I think when we will see a big negative campaign from both sides. Labor's got its negatives on Dutton, and Dutton's got his attack lines on Labor. It's a little bit of that guy's worse from both of them. And I think that probably over what feels like a long campaign now, because we've had a false start, is probably good for minor parties and Teal candidates. So it's a really multi-dimensional election this time, and we could have anywhere.
Well, it's different moods as well in different states. So, like, example, you mentioning Victoria, but then you go to South Australia, not that far. It's the neighbouring state, but entirely different mood towards the Labor brand there, largely because of Premier Malinauskas. And
that's right.
And I did say before that Sturt has been suggested to me so many times that Labor can pick it up, election after election. This time looks a bit different. And then a Liberal friend said to me they've bet a bottle of Shiraz, nice Adelaide, South Australian Shiraz, that they will actually hold it and get a swing to them, the Liberals. So we'll see. Yeah. But there you go. There's James Stephens, a margin. It's only 0.5% they're in Sturt, Parnell.
And this is the problem. This is the issue when you have a good premier, often that will reflect on the brand quite well. I mean, like in New South Wales, we have a Labor right premier who is doing a good job, and will that affect the Labor brand overall, or are they seen as one-offs? Because we've got to remember that Malinauskas has said some pro-nuclear things. So these are areas in which the premiers act as a bit of an unknown factor. They're not Dutton-style or Albanese-style premiers, and so they kind of mix up the equation a bit.
I think Sturt is hard seat for Labor to win, but they're putting up a good show. The Greens are putting up a big campaign there. Labor won the state by-election, was in the same seat, off a strong Green vote as well. It's a bit of a 3-way contest, but it is a big mountain to climb to get the Liberal vote.
On the budget, I've received a readout of some focus groups from the Labor Party earlier. So Labor focus groups. So take it for what it is. But they're saying that doing the budget was probably the best thing they could have done, because the tax cuts, the energy rebate, Medicare, they're all cutting through those messages and allowing Chalmers, the platform, as the best communicator in the government to deliver it has cut through. And what it's done politically, Ben, is like in any election contest, you've got to contrast that with what you say is the alternative and what they're warning of. And, the scare campaign is that there'll be cuts under a coalition government.
Except tax cuts. It's a devastating line from them. And Jim Chalmers had a blinder last week. Nobody predicted those income tax cuts coming in. Nobody predicted they could get them into the House of Representatives that quickly. Then nobody predicted they could get them through the Senate the next day. And then nobody predicted the Liberals would come out and say, we're going to roll them back. And that gave Jim enormous momentum and the government momentum going into this campaign. On the other hand, Dutton has taken a ballsy move by saying we're going to repeal those tax cuts. He's made it a contest. And as an opposition leader, you've always got to do that. But it's clear Labor goes into this campaign with some momentum. They've had a great 3 or 4 weeks. I think the Trump factor is starting to play for them. But that is against a backdrop of Dutton having 18 months of good running. So I think this is a very close election. If you average all the polls at the moment, you come out at 50.0 to 50.0. Probably on those figures, neither side can win a majority, and you're looking at a minority government. But think how much politics has changed in the last 4 weeks, and we've got 5 weeks to go.
This was, indeed. This was a pretty slick effort, I think, today from both sides. There were no gaffes. I know that's a low bar, but there were no gaffes from either side. And, first news conference, that's what you want. What about the fight over tax cuts? Were you surprised that Peter Dutton chose to have that fight?
I was surprised, and I think anybody who's being honest was surprised, but that's precisely the strength of the move. So he shocked everybody in rejecting them. And again, he moved off the sort of comfortable Me Too politics, which has seen him start to lag behind. The polls had been going very well for him, trending in his direction over the last 8 months or so, and just turned around and started going in the other way as he did the Me Too politics over the last couple of weeks. So I think that he's going to be very well served by taking on an oppositional perspective again, but looking like a leader, looking like somebody who's making hard choices for the right reason as he sees it, and that people are looking for that. They're not looking for focus grouped politics anymore. We've had 10 years of that, both colours of government, and it's time for some leaders. Seeing that in Queensland as well with Chris Foley. That's what people are looking for, as politicians who stand for something.
A bit of authenticity.
That's right.
Oh, I think Chris Foley, he was kind of well known for backing Labor government on so many policies. He really matched them. Whereas Dutton does have this risk around him for a lot of people. It does feel insecure times. Cost of living is the issue number 1, 2 and 3. I think the government has been able to successfully paint him as a risk that things will be cut. And, you say that to Dutton's credit, he's promising to cut things. He's 41,000 cuts to the public service. His background on cuts to Medicare in the past is giving the government fertile ground, and we're going to see a blizzard of negativity in the threat that Dutton is to people's cost of living. And yes, the government hasn't. Some people think they haven't done enough and they've gone backwards. But the government's done a few things, whether it's Medicare or whether it's the tax cuts or whether it's energy rebates, to build a case that we're doing something. Things have turned the corner, interest rates have come down, and now Dutton is a risk to all of that with his cuts.
Can I just say one last thing on that, please, really quickly? So you say cost of living is 1, 2, 3, etc. But one of the things nobody is looking at in those charts is that outside of the 5, we've got issues such as national security and issues such as crime and social cohesion, and they are linked in people's minds. If you put them together, some polls you would see them coming into the top 5 concerns, and I think that that's playing into Peter Dutton's consideration set in this election campaign.
Interesting point. Very interesting to conclude on that. National security and safety, crime and safety. Normally you think it's a state level issue, but you're right. I think it's something that's reverberating and could pop up throughout this campaign. Parnell, Ben, great to see you both. Thank you.